Hey, everybody. Welcome to the Uncovering Anomalies Podcast. I'm your host, Adam. I am doing it solo today. Topher is out for personal reasons. He should be back next week, though. Today is August 18th, 2024, and we will be going through some updates, some UAP updates, UFO updates, maybe some physics updates, and then we'll go and end with our favorite politics. Hope everyone is doing well out there. Thank you for the nice comments from our listeners and followers. We really appreciate that. All right, let's start with, we have something from Mr. Dolan himself. He's on News Nation. And he's on News Nation because they are talking about USOs. And he's been recently doing a lot of research into USOs for the past couple of years now. He's preparing for a new book. I think it's the final in his series of UFOs in the national security state. I think it's that one. And it focuses mostly on USOs, or unidentified submerged objects, which are UFOs underwater, which makes total sense, right? It's with 70% of this planet is ocean, largely unexplored, depths we can't even get to. There's a lot of it, way more than land. So if they're going to hide out somewhere, it's a perfect place to hide out. That, mountains, underground. So News Nation did a section on that, and Richard Dolan was invited on, of course, to get his knowledge from the research he's done about USOs. So let's take a listen.
To UAPs, unidentified anomalous phenomena, to include land, air, and sea. However, 80% of the world's ocean remains unexplored, making USOs harder to scientifically prove. Joining me now is Richard Dolan, a UAP historian and host of Richard Dolan Intelligent Disclosure on YouTube. Richard, good morning.
Hi, Nick. Thank you very much for having me here. It's a pleasure.
Help us break this down. You've researched more than 600 cases of unidentified submerged objects. What are some of the challenges you face with researching water-based phenomena and then getting that information to the public writ large?
Great question. Probably the biggest challenge is simply getting access to a lot of these reports. Most people are landlubbers. We live on the land. We're not out in the middle of the water. Unless you live on the shore of an ocean or of a large lake, you're going to be unlikely to see such water-based phenomena. And so, of all of the UFO or UAP reports that we have, only a small number are actually truly USO type reports, but they do come in. I've gone through some of the biggest databases that are publicly available. I've been given access to the MUFON case management system. I've gone through all of the cases on the National UFO Reporting Center. And there are a number of other databases that have been available to me that I've gone into, been very grateful. Aside from that, just tons of journals, books, articles. I scour them where I can. So at this point, I've collected a little more than 600 very good, I would say, extremely good cases that I have a feeling people will be interested in learning more about.
Tell me about one or two of the most fascinating ones that you've researched.
Yeah. Well, about 20% of all of the cases I found have to do with one of the nation's military, one of the world's militaries. Most of those are United States military. By far, most of the ones that I've collected. And I can say, when we hear the folks at the Pentagon say things like, well, we're going to look into this problem. We'll get back to you when we find out more about it. When I look at some of these Navy cases, there is no chance whatsoever that the upper echelon at the Pentagon and the Navy do not know. One example, there was a case from 1971. It goes back a bit. We've got many more recent cases, but this one from 1971 involved the USS John F. Kennedy aircraft carrier. In July of that year, we have a very detailed account from a gentleman who was aboard that ship, ran communications, and described just after they had finished a very intensive period of training called carrier qualifications, or CARQUALs. They were in the Caribbean, and they saw this massive orange glowing spherical object that hovered above the ship. And according to what he said, shut down their communications for a good 20, 25 minutes while the ship went to general quarters, battle stations. I would say if you're the United States Navy, there's probably nothing more important to you than your aircraft carriers, which have nuclear weapons. And anything that shuts it down even for 20 minutes has got to be of the highest level. That is not the only such case. There are many of them, a few of them from the old Soviet Navy as well, but quite a few from the United States
Richard
Navy.
Dolan, I got to go, but I want you to give me that website one more time.
Well, I have a YouTube channel called Richard Dolan Intelligent Disclosure. People can check me out on the web at richarddolanmembers.com.
Richard Dolan, thank you so much, sir.
Short clip, too bad. But that's how it is with network television. Speaking of Richard Dolan, for those that don't know, he is my favorite UFO researcher. He was a big part of the Wilson memo leaks, UFO leak. If you guys have not gone into that, I know we've spoken to it on the about it on the show, but if you haven't checked those out, check them out. This was a leak from U.S. government. I think it was Deputy Director of Intelligence or something, and Stephen Greer and his team did brief him about this subject in the 90s. They gave him names of projects, and he said that, okay, he will look into it. Apparently, he looked into it, got to the actual program, was denied access, and then was threatened with his career. And he met up with Wilson Davis, who worked with NICAP, or which is Bigelow's research company, and those notes got leaked. And then, of course, Wilson denies having that meeting. But they're very interesting, definitely authentic. They're not made up. They're not a hoax. And it talks about a reverse engineering program. So Dolan does a 5-hour deep dive. We won't go into that here, but I will leave the link in the show notes so you guys can check them out. We can listen to just a little bit here. He interviews someone he calls Mr. X because he wants to remain anonymous. So here's the intro of the show.
Analyst of the UFO phenomenon, but he reserves the right for anonymity, and I respect that, and I think that's completely legitimate on his part. He gave a very, very thorough 3+ hour interview a couple of months ago with Jay over at Project Unity. You can go check out that YouTube channel, which was a extended deep dive into what we're going to talk about here today, which is the notes by Dr. Eric Davis on his meeting with Admiral Thomas Wilson relating to the failed attempt by Admiral Wilson to get access to to a program in which apparent ET technology was being reverse engineered. Wilson at the time was just about to become head of intelligence for the Joint Chiefs of Staff and director of the DIA, the Defense Intelligence Agency. He was very high up. This has become a famous story in the field of ufology. I am part of that story, having been shown, as I've said many times, 2 pages of this document way, way back in 2006. I have still not given up the identity of the man who showed me those documents, but I have said time and again, he was exactly the right person in the exact correct position to be able to do that for me. In any case, our guest, Mr. X, has done an analysis of this 13-page document that I think is better than that done by anyone else that's out there right now. And so we're going to do hopefully a somewhat more concise breakdown of this document, making it a little bit more approachable for folks to understand just why this is important, the whole background, what we're dealing with here. So, Mr. X, thank you and welcome to the program.
Oh, I'm so glad to be here with you, Richard.
It's my pleasure as well, and I think a lot of listeners are looking forward to this. So I'm going to hand this over to you. I gave a brief little back. Actually, if you don't mind, allow me.
Yeah, actually, let's listen to this. This is what I meant to be. I was too early. Let's listen to this part.
To give a very, very quick explanation as to why many of us think this document's important. Do you mind if I do that?
Oh, go ahead, please.
All right, very quickly, and then I want you to jump in. So as a story that has largely, this part has all been confirmed, which is that in 1997, Stephen Greer, along with a number of other individuals, you can get into the details, Mr. X, was able to have an audience with Admiral Thomas Wilson and other individuals present, including Wilson's boss, we'll get into that, in which he spoke about black budget programs relating to ET technology. That was something that was done. Greer was accompanied by Apollo 14 astronaut Edgar Mitchell, as well as Navy Commander Willard Miller, a very important part in all this. After the meeting, from what we believe happened, Miller stayed behind, spoke to his colleague, Admiral Wilson, for a couple of hours, by which they talked about things like UFOs, MJ12, and much more. And Wilson then went on a 2-month journey, essentially, to find this program, actually found several of them. And in the one in particular that he tried to get access to was denied and was essentially told, you do not have a need to know. He said, well, I'll complain up the chain of command. They said, fine, be our guest, chain, complain all you want. It won't get you anywhere. Wilson did, and he was threatened with his career. He was very angry about it. And shortly after that, did become head of the DIA and head of intelligence for the Joint Chiefs of Staff. This is 1997. And then retired from government service in 2002. Shortly after that happened, he, according to the notes that are dated October 16, 2002, he met with Dr. Eric Davis of the National Institute for Discovery Science, an employee of Robert Bigelow, a colleague of people like Dr. Hal Puthoff and Colm Kelleher and Dr. Christopher Green and Edgar Mitchell, and interviewed Thomas Wilson about this entire event. And Wilson gave a detailed interview. Those notes, 2 pages of which I was shown in 2006, but they were not available to the public until after Edgar Mitchell died in 2016. And eventually, by 2019, they had made their way out in full form. And we have been reeling ever since. So that's...
All right, so we can quickly, he linked up his article on that. We can quickly go through some of those notes just to pique your interest, and then you guys can delve into that in your own time. So here's the exchange between Eric Davis and Admiral Wilson. So Davis, who was the project contractor or government agent, who was the project contractor or government agency that ran the program? So here's the notes. Davis, change subject. So what SAP compartment did you find? Admiral Wilson, core secret, won't say. Davis, code name? Wilson, again, won't say, core secret. Davis, who was the project contractor or USG agency that runs program? Wilson, an aerospace technology contractor, one of the top ones in the US, probably Lockheed, right? Davis, who? Wilson, core secret, can't tell. Davis, defense contractor. Wilson, yes, the best one of them. Davis, intelligence too. Wilson, in their corporate portfolio. Davis, give a hint. Wilson, sorry, no. So even after, he retired and all that, he still won't tell him who the contractor is. It's probably Lockheed. So Wilson, end of May 1997, made 3 calls to the program manager. One of them, conference call with security director and corporate attorney. Confusion on their part as to why I was looking for them and what I wanted from them or wanted to know about. Very testy tone from all of them. Davis, what do you mean? Wilson, they were agitated about my calling, surprised by call. Davis, what you asked them? Wilson, yes. Oh, what you asked them? Basically, they were annoyed about what he asked. What was that? What words? I read their program record in the OUSAT Special Program Record Group, what their role in that was, what they had, etc. Also asked if they heard of MJ12 or some such organization code relating to crashed, recovered UFO craft. Davis, reaction on phone to that? Yes. As to I talked to before I called them, so I told them, and they weren't happy with that answer. So it goes much deeper than that, folks. We don't want to spend too much time on this, but these notes are legit. They're not a hoax. And there's obvious, as we all know, a program within the U.S. government to study crash UFO, well, maybe not extraterrestrial, let's say NHI non-human intelligence crash retrieval programs. Probably helped us out as an empire, making us the most technologically advanced in the world, which makes sense why they would keep this all secret. But fine, keep the technology secret. Keep the processes of what you do secret. Do they have to keep the actual context secret? That's what we're against. All right, moving along, we can go on Richard Geldrick, one of probably the best researchers out there, especially for old UFO documents. He corroborates everything. He goes through newspapers. He goes through FOIA documents that have been out, leaked documents, and he corroborates all of it to prove that there's something there, that it's not just nothing and all misinformation. Yes, there is misinformation. So he found this one, and this is his post. On August 1952, Doc approved for release in 2001. The Psychological Strategy Board's director was Gordon Gray, MJ12 UAP Working Group. The Director of Central Intelligence, this is a quote from the document, the Director of Central Intelligence shall formulate and carry out a program of intelligence and research activities required to solve the problem of instant, positive identification of unidentified flying objects. This effort shall be coordinated with the military services, the R&D board of the DoD, with the Psychological Strategy Board and other governmental agencies as appropriate. So here's a great find here. And it's in response to Psychological Strategy Board and Gordon Gray. So basically, he's proving that the leaked MJ12 documents had information in there that was not in the public domain. So if it was a hoax, how could they even include information that none of us really knew about or could corroborate? So there's that. There's another one he found, Project Moonwatch. Project Moonwatch was a project of one of the defense contractors in the 50s and 60s. They were making observations in space of objects in space, probably looking for Russian and Soviet satellites, but they also saw other anomalous objects. And if I can find it here, I remember he also shared one that was found right before in the area that of Project Fishbowl or Star Prime. Anyway, it was the atmospheric nukes up in space. It was in that area that they found something. So here's all the look at that. It goes back to 1958 Moonwatch. All the ones that say Moonwatch is a DoD contract. I think it's Grumman. Yeah, it is Grumman. So like this one in 1958, white object seems to merge with Gamma Geminorum. Another one, flashing red object seen 3 times in 1.5 hours. Bright flashing round object seen 3 times. So these have all been declassified as well. And Heineken Valet actually went through these. And he found this article. So very cool there, especially now that there's been some other information leaked out of a UFO that was downed at the with that project that with atmospheric nukes. He also found that in 1955, this has been talked about a lot, that there was a lot of research going on in this country about anti-gravity, and it was in all of the scientific magazines. I think Popular Mechanics had it, Scientific American, and the newspapers. And there was so much media about anti-gravity in the 50s, and then it all stopped. So people think it probably went black, and we were probably able to crack anti-gravity sometime in the 1950s, which makes sense. That's why people say that a lot of these UFOs are not just NHI, but they are human. And likely why there's so much secrecy too. I mean, the power of anti-gravity is not a joke. I mean, if we were scared of nukes, could you imagine having the power of anti-gravity in the wrong hands? So here in 1955, U.S. gravity research was just taken off, very likely inspired by UAP propulsion and classified World War II developments. So here's that. Scientists take first steps in assault on gravity barrier from 1955. And then here's some more articles that he found in the newspaper. Engineering engineers aiming to flout gravity. So cool stuff. Great to see that we have documentations about it. And he also wrote a Medium article titled "The DoD's Modern UAP Containment Strategy." And this is great. It's exactly what's is watching this and understands the big picture will come to the same conclusion. So he goes, it's obvious to anyone who's closely watched this situation unfold on Twitter X over the past few years. He has bullet points. 1, put out a trusted intel officer, insider with a high security clearance, NDAs. Have him run interference and spread doubts. Get him interviewed on podcasts to establish his presence and credibility. Have him be obsessed with constant talk about aliens. Be sure to toss that word around a lot. Have him join forces with a trusted reporter. Have this reporter monitor social media and misquote individuals in his documentaries. Have fake, typically anonymous, whistleblowers go on X Spaces, spreading disinfo and misinfo to anyone who will listen. Unleash your army of anonymous social media influencers to induce lots of infighting, spread FUD and disinfo, misinfo. Have your intel officer, if you guys haven't figured out already, he's talking about Kirkpatrick, the guy with a high security clearance, keep falsely pointing out that there's no data or evidence when he very well knows that any such physical evidence would be extremely highly classified and hidden inside multiple USAPs or UWSAPs, which are unacknowledged and waived. Get a Class or Menzel-style debunker, he's talking about probably McWest here, under an NDA and on an intelligence buffer corp's payroll. Have him run interference on social media, podcasts, the press, etc. Have him invent terminology and explicitly drive the narrative towards aliens and ETs, etc. Have him sloppily debunk officially released videos or reports from expert pilot witnesses. Interfere and slow down UAP book authors by submitting false complaints on Amazon.com. So, and here he's probably talking about Green Street. Have him join forces with a trusted reporter. Yep, that's Green Street. So really good and good timing. He probably had that out because Kirkpatrick was interviewed again, even though he said he wants out of this subject and doesn't want to do any more interviews. Yet he still is. So here's this. Dr. Sean Kirkpatrick says on camera, as an intelligence officer, I expect all of you to expect me to lie to you. Let's hear it. Right from
expect all of you. Where we're really going is, as an intelligence officer, I would expect all of you to expect me to lie to you.
See, he's an intelligence officer, so he expects us to expect him to lie to us. All right, so here's this interview with Dr. Brian Keating. I don't know why he got this interview. Apparently, he did this interview for Dr. Brian's students. So I guess they're starting really early, trying to catch university students and stop their critical thinking right here. So we can have Kirkpatrick, the lying Kirkpatrick, tell us what the truth is. So what's the part that's really annoying in this interview is the section that says, does the public have a right to classified data? Let's take a listen.
When you see people claiming, and I asked some of my audience to contribute questions for today, and there's so much vitriol and hostility, and a lot of themes that come up is, well, this guy's salary is paid by the taxpayers, which is not true anymore. Correct, Sean? You're no longer working for. So that's not true. But let's grant it. We have a right to this data, and I say I could show you the Hubble Deep Field, and that's data. Do you have a right to it? I guess you could say you have a right to it. Could you do anything with it as an amateur? And I think, of course, the answer is no. You can make certain images, but to do actual real science, other than kind of just playing around and making pretty wallpaper and screensavers for your desktop, there's very little that an average person can do. That doesn't mean they shouldn't, have access to. But what right does the public have to data? Isn't there some, is there some balance that you try to strike between all these reports that you claim, flooded your office, but also transparency to the taxpayer? How do you balance those two competing constraints?
The American public does not have right to any classified data. And we are awash in classified data. We have how many wars going on right now? And
the problem is not just classified data, it's overclassification. They classify everything. So to say like we don't have a right to it is not a fair thing to say. I mean, because they can classify anything they want. If you read the National Disclosure Act of 1947, anyone within a chain of command can classify something because they feel like it. Does that make it mean that we're not supposed to see it? Now, he'll go on here. He'll say, there's classified maybe like satellites and their capabilities. They don't want to reveal the capabilities of the government. That's fine. We're not asking that. They keep saying this instead of telling us what the core context is, that there are NHI and other civilizations way more advanced. They won't touch that. They won't, so let's continue.
Every time we take an overhead satellite image from one of our intelligence satellites, that's classified data. You have no right to that. That is used for national security reasons, purposes, and missions. And the taxpayer pays a subset of the public, military, civilian, and contractors for the purposes of national security and to protect this nation. Now, you either pay them and you trust them to go do their job, or you don't trust them to go do their job and you should stop paying them and let somebody invade and take over this nation. I mean, pick.
Pay us or be invaded. No, pay us and trust us or be invaded. This guy.
Your poison. When it comes to this particular data, the government is trying very, very hard to declassify stuff and push it out so that people can see, so there can be transparency. That was the whole purpose of standing up Arrow, and that's all I spent most of my time trying to do. And it doesn't go fast. What people don't understand is, contrary to what you see in the public media, you can't just snap your fingers and say something is declassified. Nobody has that authority. It has to go through an interagency process, for one. Two, the owner of that data has their own declassification procedures. So everybody is different. And why is this a problem? Well, if I get, as the director, if I got data that came from the Air Force, I have to go through Air Force procedures to get it declassified. And what does that mean? That means they have to make sure that there's no mission-specific operational data. There's no capability data that can be compromised. It's not that there's a balloon in it. It's because I'll come back to why things are classified. But that's the Air Force, right? The Army has a different process and a different procedure. The Navy has a different process and a different procedure. The intelligence community has different processes and procedures and different rules. And so you have to go to each one of them separate, depending on who gave you the data, if there's data to be had. So there's a process, and it takes time. And that's what people don't understand, is that.
Oh, the gaslighting on this guy. Absolutely crazy. All right. Government projects mistaken for alien tech. Yeah, we've heard him say that. Biases in UFO sightings, trends, trust in government. Yeah, boo-hoo. He's probably saying people don't trust government anymore and their transparency. I wonder why.
Ultimate distrust of folks that are civil servants, or maybe even in the military, that give their whole careers to this effort. How do you balance those? How do you square those two?
That's one of the things that is the most disappointing about this entire endeavor is,
mind you, Grush, Elizondo, all those guys, they're also military personnel and government workers, high level as well. So what about them? So he's just. Anyway,
my team was made up of military and civilian intelligence officers who have dedicated their lives and careers to serving the national interest, national security, have served overseas. I've been overseas, and yet the civilians often get shunted aside and not ascribed the same level of respect And I'll tell you, as intelligence officers, most intelligence officers, when they serve overseas, they're serving in war zones right alongside the uniformed military. They are supporting the military by doing intelligence. They are collecting. I mean, collection against an adversary means going behind enemy lines where uniformed military can't go. And yet,
all right, enough of this guy. I can't handle it. So even Black Vault, which we know he's very careful, with what to say, and he only goes on what he has and what he has with documents on hand. So he goes, "Where's the data? Where's the evidence?" Says the guy who literally directed an organization in charge of hiding the data and the evidence. And of course, John Greenwald has it on this site. He has all of the evidence. So in Arrow, he's stating here the mission statement of Arrow. UAP. I think he's answering. Who's he answering? Stephen Greenstreet. Where can I read that Arrow's mission is hiding the data and the evidence? Thanks. Sure, but I never said it was their official mission. But I did say he was in charge of the organization hiding the info, and I stand by that. History shows us, despite a posted mission statement, programs, offices, and agencies often veer away from it, UAP related or not, and Arrow has gone away from theirs. What their stated mission is to essentially collect and be the central source for all things UAP and investigate them. This is undisputed. Hope we can agree there. The UAP SCG, which classifies a lot of UAP material, is something they adhere to and follow, and have had no signs of any attempt to change that. That's a huge show of their stance on transparency. So is their X account, but that's a different post. As a result, there then becomes only one avenue legally to access UAP-related information via FOIA or mandatory declassification review requests. I can personally attest that Arrow itself plays a huge role in finding Arrow-related documents and material for my FOIA or MDR cases, then playing a role in the decision-making, as they are the office of primary responsibility and or original classifying authority, depending on their respective responsive records are requested. They also play a role in the hiding of information, as they are, again, involved in the decision-making and the initial denial authority in some cases. This includes the ever so unexplained quote-unquote law enforcement exemption they flaunt. Given the results I've written about extensively, I think that is all fairly obvious as well, and hope we can agree. The director of that through most of the time was Dr. Kirkpatrick, and I have zero doubt he has intimate knowledge about Arrow's role in that secrecy and his role in enforcing it. He may have even played a role in orchestrating the exemptions, utilize that, in my honest opinion, have no legal backing. But we will see if I can further show you docs on that. Stay tuned and all. Further to that, to see him come out and paint a different picture to what I've personally witnessed and can prove through numerous legal decisions made under U.S. Code documented proof, I 100% stand by what I said. Basically, that Kirkpatrick is covering up stuff. Yeah, and we know that. We call him UFO Fauci on this show, don't we? He just lies. And he's Dr. Greer from the mock UFO hearings in the early 2000s. This clip went viral, which it should, and it's just great. Let's take a listen.
That ended up being suppressed, that had to do with creating very high voltage VHV systems so that you could create a vector into what's now been called the 0-point energy field. When Nikola Tesla died, this information that he had, which allowed for a car to run out of the ambient energy, was in documents confiscated by the FBI. And I have a Department of Defense document demanding that the FBI turn these over to the DOD. The FBI refused. By 1928 and 29, T. Townsend Brown, as well as the Kolosky-Frost experiment in physics in Germany, had determined that VHV, very high voltage systems, done in a certain resonant field, could result in so-called electromagnetogravitic effect, the lifter effect that has been described, which you see in UFOs. They also can create what's called a space-time bubble around an object so that you can correct for 1G. This is how these objects are traveling at multiples of what any aerodynamic physics would describe, and can make right-hand turns without killing the occupants. Around this same time, there was, in the 1940s and the late 1930s, a number of UFO sightings. This included the so-called Foo Fighters. Yes, it's a famous rock group. However, the Foo Fighters took their name from the reports of these objects seen in the theater of World War II that were flying around our aircraft. We thought it was a secret weapon of the Nazis. The Nazis thought it was a secret weapon of ours. There was Jimmy Doolittle, the famous general. His nephew is a dear friend of mine, and he has testified that General Doolittle was sent by FDR over to the European theater in World War II, investigated the Foo Fighters, and came back and told Roosevelt, and I quote, "They are interplanetary vehicles." So by then, there began a classified program, and which was augmented further by events, as mentioned, in 1941, and then, of course, the famous Roswell event. Those events led to, as Philip Corso describes, a reverse engineering program. As you all know from the famous Wilbur Smith document of 1951 from Canada, it talks about that flying saucers exist, but there's a high-level team headed up by Dr. Vannevar Bush that is studying the, quote, modus operandi of these vehicles. In October of 1954, a key date I want the committee to remember, we have actionable intelligence from someone who has worked in the National Security Agency, and it's been in the vault. All of this went deep black because they figured out at that point gravity control. So since 1954, October of that year, we have not needed rockets, jets, internal combustion engines, and surface roadways between cities. I say this with authority that this is the case. Eventually, these breakthroughs in human discovery were complemented by the study of the extraterrestrial material that were retrieved from these events. And contrary to most people's thoughts, the Roswell event was actually a downing of an extraterrestrial vehicle by an electromagnetic system that was hidden in a radar dome that was switched on. And this is in an FBI document that I can provide for the committee and is on the flash drive given to the Congress. The result ultimately was that there were transdimensional physics that began to be studied that deal with the nexus between electromagnetism, energy generation, anti-gravity, and consciousness. And we have discovered that there is a nexus and that, in fact, there are electromagnetic systems that have been developed that can interface directly with what we call coherent thought, the same way that you can interface with a system with lasers, which is coherent light, where you sync up all the wavelengths. Ultimately, these breakthroughs were paralleled with amazing developments in the biological sciences and the experimentation with cloning. And this began many years earlier than was reported from Dolly the sheep in Scotland. This goes a little beyond, I think, what this committee wants to look into. However, you need to understand that the technologies that we have and we were discussing are not theoretical. We have actionable intelligence that any committee in Congress or executive action can find regarding current operations. And I just want to go through a list of them very quickly of these facilities and corporations for which we have witnesses who can be subpoenaed by the committees of the Congress. This was developed at the request of Congressman Christopher Cox of Orange County, and with whom I met, and was later further developed for the briefing that we put together for President Obama. These facilities are the Edwards Air Force Base and subsections where at the dry lake bed where the Lockheed Skunk Works operations, Haystack Butte, China Lakes, George Air Force Base, and the closed Norton Air Force Base, where an anti-gravity device, so-called alien reproduction vehicle, for which we have the schematics, was seen by Frank Carlucci. and others on our witness team. Tabletop Mountain and Blackjack Control. The aerospace facilities there are the Northrop Anthill Facility, Tejon Ranch, the McDonnell Douglas Llano Plant, Lockheed Martin Hellendale Plant, and the Phillips Lab. At the Nellis Air Force Facility, so-called Area 51, no one calls it that. There's S4 and S12, Pahut Mesa, Groom Lake, and a number of sub-facilities. The most important facility is in Utah, near Provo, the Dugway Proving Grounds, all of which is underground, and the airspace above it is classified. There are no roads into this facility. The New Mexico facilities include Los Alamos National Labs with underground connectors to the so-called Dulce area where the biological work is being done, and Kirtland Air Force Base. And the complex there includes Sandia National Laboratories, Phillips Labs, Manzano Mountain Weapons Storage Facility, Coyote Canyon, and the White Sands Complex. In Arizona, near Fort Huachuca, which is Army Intelligence Headquarters, there is a UGB underground base where one of our witnesses who will testify worked on 9 separate extraterrestrial vehicles that had been down through advanced electromagnetic pulse weapons. And there are several different species of extraterrestrial biologicals stored at that facility. The other facilities, and this goes on, include a special compartmented area of Cheyenne Mountain, where we have witnesses in our team who can be subpoenaed, where we have tracked extraterrestrial vehicles in our solar system that were measuring 26 miles in diameter. There are also facilities in Australia, a key one being Pine Gap, the so-called Alice Springs facility, which is mostly a U.S. Air Force facility, even though it is in Australia. I recently talked to the Deputy Prime Minister of Australia about this. Also, the Redstone Arsenal and the Marshall Space Flight Center. We have a scientist at the Redstone Arsenal who works under contract for IT&T, who have developed these transdimensional systems. He was under contract with my project to bring these energy devices out, and he was then threatened by a former CIA director and what I call the goon squad that went down there 3 years ago in March. This is just part of the information we have.
Wow. So yeah, he names all the bases. He names project names. Even he names the defense contractors. Congress has had this information forever, which is why they are pushing so much of the UAP Disclosure Act, regardless of what Kirkpatrick said. And it's why also they directed an independent investigation of Arrow after Kirkpatrick's really bad Arrow report that came out. So, you know, there's something going on, and hopefully with the new effort of the UAP Disclosure Act, we'll talk about that in a bit here. That is our chance of getting this information out. We're not talking about wanting to know what they have, you know, and how they get it, but we just want to know the reality of the universe we live in. All right, here's a cool one. Representative Tim Burchett pledges to help probe Peru's alien mummies. So the Nazca mummies, the U.S. Congress is going to investigate now. There is a news clip here. Let's see. No, there's no audio. So, all right, let's read this. So a congressman is vowing to help unravel the mystery behind Peru's so-called alien mummies. Representative Tim Burchett, Republican from Tennessee, one of the foremost voices in Congress on unidentified aerial phenomenon, declared that he would help get to the bottom of those puzzling Peruvian objects and recruit top talent to do so. I will gladly help you find someone that would analyze them, Burchett told Jaime Maussan on his show No Humano. Last September, Maussan, who bills himself a ufologist, dragged a set of what he suggested were non-human remains to Mexico's Congress. Maussan claimed that those two objects were discovered in Peru in 2017 and had been carbon dated to between 700 and 1800 years old. Maussan further contended that DNA evidence proved those purported remains were not of Earth. Scientists have panned his bold assertions and accused him of lacking evidence. Well, we've seen on this show that there is a lot of evidence. Look, they're tiny. I think they're like a foot long or something. Wait, a foot or a meter? And scientists, they've done MRIs in this. I think one of them is even pregnant or has some eggs in there. Here's another image of one. Anyway, it'll be good to know that Congress can fund this and get some talent on there, although multiple scientists have put the time and effort into studying these, and they think there's something really strange with them. Here's another UFO sighting by commercial pilots on 4th of August. This was going, I think, somewhere in the Middle East to Nigeria, and then this is in the cockpit, and they recorded these UFOs. Some are saying that it's Starlink satellites, even though the pilot said no, they're not. He would know how they look like. So here's that clip.
Wow. Ooh, very bright now. Wow. Ooh, bright. That's UFO. Sometimes on, sometimes off, sometimes off again. Right.
It's good pilots are getting more comfortable recording these and reporting them and not being afraid of being called crazy. So there it is. Now you would think a Starlink satellite would be much higher up than that. Oh, now it's two of them. I mean, they reported that these lights were playing games with them.
Guys, ini bukanlah karangan atau gambar ya.
Okay, I think he's speaking in his native language. Let me read what he said. 1 second. Guys, this is not a joke or a picture that was made, but this is my experience of seeing something strange or UFO anomaly or unidentified flying object. An unidentified flying object. What we see is still a mystery. What is it in the sky and dancing? Before that, we thought the light was a plane, but it wasn't on our radar. Then we thought maybe it was a star, but the stars twinkled quickly, and the stars didn't move, while the UFO light shone for a long time and moved. Then we also thought that the possibility, because right now there are a lot of Starlink satellites that have just been launched by Elon Musk, but it's impossible for a satellite to move like that because the light of the UFO in front of us moves freely, sometimes forward, sometimes backward, left, right, or vice versa. And they can light up 4 at the same time by moving to create formation. But outside, they don't bother us. Instead, they seem to entertain us, dancing, making us awake when we are sleepy. And sometimes they also flash a light as if they want to give a message. But what message? We really don't understand. Very cool. So, for those who say these were just Starlink satellites, the pilots say they're not. They were moving. They weren't. Starlink goes through a trajectory, just like an orbital trajectory. We know where it's going to be, and he said it was moving back and forth, up and down, and vice versa. So it was not that. So very cool. That happened last week, or 2 weeks ago, on a flight to Nigeria. So here's another. So this came out. It was a picture from the 1930s in Alaska. Apparently, this man saw a being in the woods that just looked weird, and he ran after it and was able to get a picture of it in the 1930s. So AI was applied to this image, and it's really cool, actually. So we have, this is from UFO Sightings Daily. I think he put it through the software, and he goes through the image.
Looking at an AI picture corrected of a alien or creature in the woods in Alaska. This is normal right here. This is actually a screenshot. I took a closer screenshot. We'll show you the farther away one, which is slightly different with AI. Now look at this. You can see this figure, this small 3-foot high figure in the woods in Alaska from the 1930s. Hit that subscribe button. This is the full photo itself. You can see the sky, the trees, the little person there. And I just want you to see the whole photo there. Now, this is not AI corrected here. This is just normal. I want to show you normal for a few minutes. The guy said his father would often go very far, tens of miles back into the Alaska outback. And he one day saw this small human-like creature in white, and he followed it. He followed it through the woods until he could finally get a photograph of it. And he got one photo of this creature before it ran off and disappeared, and he couldn't keep up. This is from the 1930s. Pretty good photo for the 1930s, right? Anyway, the person sent it in is his grandson, and he says, I don't know what it is, alien or Bigfoot or whatever, but I want to check this out with AI.
Bigfoot.
So let's look at AI. Now AI is on the right, and on the left is normal. This is just a screenshot. This is a closer up screenshot, I want to say, because AI takes a different outlook on things. When you are closer to it, it looks a little bit different than the outcome if it was further away. So here it is right here. Look at that. That does look like a small white alien to me. Okay. Now here it is farther away. This one looks a little bit different. However, you do see the focus of the trees. You see the bark on the trees. And it looks like one side, the right side of the alien, right side for him, is blurred as if it's cloaked. As if you can't see it. It's just cloaked by something like a smudge or a cloud or a mirror. It's weird. But you can see the bark on the trees. I mean, that's how detailed this AI is. You can see the bark on the trees. So is this an accurate depiction of the alien, or is the earlier one? Now, remember, the earlier one, I took a close screenshot of it just around the alien. No big trees and stuff nearby. But this one with the trees and everything, perhaps AI is focusing on the trees and it doesn't focus as well on the alien itself. But it does look like this is a successful capture of a small alien about 3 feet tall, possibly, very possibly, highly likely in a suit, some kind of contaminant suit, so it won't be exposed to our viruses or our other bacteria on our planet, or maybe so it won't expose us. Who needs a black plague again, right? So who knows? I mean, This is really unique stuff, really amazing. This is AI here. And you can see the bark on the trees. You can see the detail of the trees. It's absolutely amazing. So is this...
Look at that guy. I mean, I guess he could be an interdimensional being, or he is trying to cloak himself. Very strange.
accurate for the alien here, or was the earlier alien more accurate? But either way, the story of this 1930s photo in Alaska and the man chasing this alien through the woods trying to get just one photo, and he succeeded. He succeeded. He got that one photo. He got the evidence we need. As AI gets better, I'm sure it's going to correct the pixelization and everything in detail more perfect, so we can see even better accurate photo than
He's
this.
definitely tiny.
Scott C. Waring, hit that like and subscribe button. Tell me what is going
on. All right, cool. Eyewitness killed is in the title here. He didn't say that. The picture was taken in the early 1930s by the sender's grandfather who lived in Alaska. The entity was first seen when the grandfather was on his way to a lake. They chased the entity until he got close enough to take this one picture. It was some 4 months before the photograph was developed, being in a remote, sparsely populated area. The sender received the picture from his grandfather only last week. His grandfather died the day after giving him the photo. Okay, all right. And relating his story. Crazy. Very cool what AI can do. People are using AI to even go through old blacked out documents that it can discern what the words are that are blacked out. So yeah, it's definitely a cool tool we can use. This has also been making the round. So on Ross Coulthard's show, he revealed this post right here. On 19 September 1962, an Atlas ICBM missile test captured this UAP unidentified object tracking the warhead's re-entry, an event even DoD Aero admits is a real UAP. Here, Australian former intelligence. This is a great interview, by the way. We'll link it. So I think this is the UAP, and then the video by Think Tank shared this is on the new is in the U.S. National Archives. So this is the atmospheric nuclear test that we're doing, and this is the re-entry of the missile. So this is the missile here. I think this is also, unless I don't think this is a UAP. So it's burning up, as we can see. As we go through the video, though, we will see that the video pans up to look at this object that's watching what's going on. So the pan comes up right now. There it is. They're panning up. And here's this object here. That has nothing to do with the re-entry. And the video ends there. Wonder why that is the image that Ross Coulthard captured. And saying that even Arrow is saying that it is anomalous. So what happened with, that's what it's called, Starfish Prime, atmospheric nuclear test downed UFO, which was later recovered by the U.S. government. So here is a video of that. The explosion in space, nuclear explosion in space. And there it is, crashing down to Earth. I always wondered why we were even exploding nukes in space. It was trying to show someone how capable we are, how powerful we are. And it was probably to knock out stuff in orbit. Because when earlier we talked about Project Moonwatch, there was one, and I mentioned there was one that they found that was in orbit. We might have talked about it last week. That was going the opposite way. And it looks like we used the nuke to bring it down. This might be the one. Hard to say. There's the explosion. And there is something falling. Might be worth it, you know. if these objects have such advanced technology, we can get our hands on it. Anyone would do that. If you have the funds like we do and the manpower, why not? Bluegill, yeah. So very cool there. All right, and so apparently Rand Paul is the only one holding up the UAP Disclosure Act in the Senate. So I looked into this. I was very upset, and I was like, the guy's a libertarian, and I went on Twitter and I tagged him. I said, why would a libertarian be against this? Why would it be against transparency? Why would it be against having the American people know about this reality about NHI? And again, I looked into it, and of course, they left eminent domain in there. This is not in here, of course, but eminent domain, you do not want to give that power to the government. You just don't. It's just not. It's an antithesis to our foundational, the foundings of this country. This is not the Soviet Union. That is the power tyrannical governments have, is eminent domain. When it comes to these, yes, we want this out, but does that mean we want to give them that power to get this information out? Because they still won't. Even if we give them this power, they'll say, "Oh, we didn't find anything." So I bet that's why Rand Paul is against this. So hopefully, he just does an amendment and that instead of completely blocking the UAPDA. So I'm going to go back on X and revisit that, and just hopefully I'll put it in there that I hope that he'll just put an amendment to get rid of eminent domain, but to go ahead with the UAP Disclosure Act. This is our chance. This is still our chance. It's a very powerful act. They gutted it last year, so hopefully this one, when it comes through, it won't be gutted. Except for eminent domain, I'm against that. I just am. It just goes against what I believe the powers of government should be or should have. All right, so this is a press release. Eyewitnesses to 1966 Dexter UFO sighting to share their story for the first time. Here is an image or a picture that they drew of what the UFO looked like. Quilted surface, lights on both ends, a light in the middle, and then antenna. All right, so on the night of March 20th, 1966, two young women from Dexter found themselves at the center of a mysterious event that has puzzled locals for decades. The sisters-in-law, both in their 20s, were visiting a friend with an active police scanner when they heard a startling announcement. Law enforcement was being dispatched to the Frank Manor residence on McGinnis Road to investigate an unidentified flying object that had appeared on his property. Without hesitation, the women quickly said their goodbyes, packed their two toddlers into the back seat, and navigated the back roads to the manor's rented farmhouse, eager to witness the unusual phenomenon. Upon their arrival, however, the object had already vanished from sight. Undeterred, and with information from the scanner indicating another sighting near Peach Mountain, the two decided to continue their search. Wow, how fun. Their journey took them through the rural roads of Dexter, leading them to Peach Mountain Observatory Road. As they ascended the narrow gravel path, they carefully maneuvered around a parked sheriff's cruiser. The children in the back seat, Bobby and Danny, had fallen asleep, unaware of the extraordinary moment unfolding around them. When they reached the top of the 100-foot high hill, the women saw a sight that would forever alter their understanding of life. Now, nearly 60 years later, these two eyewitnesses will share their incredible story with the public for the first time. So this is happening August 20th, which is in a couple days, on Tuesday. They'll be featured, offering a rare glimpse into their accounts of that fateful night. These interviews have never been made available to the public before, making this a unique opportunity for those fascinated by the 1966 swamp gas flying saucers. So this will be at the District Library. It's for free, but it's probably a full house. You can reserve a spot at the library's website. Oh, look at that. And click on the events page. All right, we'll check that out. And hopefully we'll report on that next week. What else do we have? Oh, this is So this is David Paulides. If you guys don't know who,
Hey there, friends. Dave Paulides.
he's the one who's done the series Missing 411. Great series of documentaries, and basically that investigation into those missing people brought him into Bigfoot, and then also brought him into UFOs. I just recently watched his Missing 411, the UFO Connection. Amazing documentary. Definitely watch it. There's some great cases in there. Paulides is an amazing researcher, so he put in cases that are verified with witnesses, and just fascinating with the conclusions he came to. So with this though, it talks about Bigfoot DNA and the testing that they did and the crowdsourcing that they did, and basically they concluded that Bigfoot is a hybrid creature. Hybrid as in human hybrid. So they found that the mitochondrial DNA is human, but the father part of the DNA, they can't, they don't know what it is. What happened? Yeah, they don't know what it is, and if it was contaminated data, then it would have shown at least him or someone else on his team that that touched the material. But no, there was nothing in the database, and they used GenBank. So he goes through that in this 1 hour presentation. I don't think we should go through all of it, but there is some interesting things he talks about here. Even Indian tribes that knew about Sasquatch and its supernatural abilities. So yes, it's a biped. Yes, it's intelligent. Yes, that's why we see it as human, but it's different. So that different part of it, we don't know what it is, but it's given its supernatural powers. We know that it can cloak itself. That's what people talk about being interdimensional. People also, when it enters a space or an area in the forest, everything goes quiet. You can't hear anything. It's just like UFOs. When UFOs enter an environment in the forest, everything also goes quiet. Just So there's that. So who created it and why? Could it be to clear out an area before landing? Scare all wildlife, scare our humans, get them out of the way so they can land. Is it a hunter for them? Grab things like elk or cows or buffalo that they need genetic material for. So there's some connection there, and David Paulides has proved this with his documentary series and this presentation. It's a great presentation. He goes through the process of the DNA testing. They even used a robotic DNA testing process, which means no human touched it throughout the entire process. And it's used for death row. And that's why they actually created this, because they don't want any human element in there affecting the results. So it is so I think here he talks about the Indian tribe.
Call it the Silatic tribe. The Klalem, Lumi, and the Quinault tribes of the Northwest had a press conference. And I'm going to show you the article. This is it over here. But the article essentially surmises that the Silatic tribe, the Bigfoot tribe, big, hairy giants, they can imitate sounds. They have bear and bird language abilities. They're harmless unless one of their tribe is killed. They will kill 1 to 3 of their attackers, and they have supernatural powers. Now, this was said in 1924. Understand?
So 1924, and this Indian tribe called the Bigfoot also an Indian tribe, but they just had supernatural powers.
Yeah. I don't have that big of an ego. Some people may think so, but I don't. Because I know I'm not the sharpest knife in the drawer. But my research is pretty darn thorough.
Yeah, his research is amazing. So they actually went through. He says that for some reason, Bigfoot has an ability to recognize technology, and that's why like all these cams don't catch them. these hunting cams, or I forget what they're called, that they put them in the woods, taped to a tree. So it doesn't work. So what he did with his friend, who's also a Bigfoot researcher, they used tape. They used baits. He says like pancakes or something like that. But then they put tape there so they know that when Bigfoot tries to reach for it, that tape is going to pull his hair and they'll get follicles. And they DNA tested that. So I think this is where.
Pulling the follicle out with the hair. You need the follicle to get the DNA. This is what we did, kind of a little description of how we did it. Not real high tech, in fact, very, very low tech, which is why I think it worked. So right away, we started to get samples. And I can't think of a time where they were ever pulled off or damaged, or nobody kind of understood what we were doing. Everyone kind of left it alone. And this is kind of a low tech. At nighttime, we went out, we were taking pictures of the hair on the tape on the tree. Now, did we know what we were looking for? Oh, absolutely. In the nutshell, Bigfoot hair looks like pubic hair. That's the best way to describe it. Now, we would get the tape back, and this is what the hair would look like on the tape.
Yep.
This is some of the Bigfoot hair we got.
Looks like pubic hair.
Kind of get a good idea what it looks like. Now, some of the pieces of the hair were anywhere from maybe a half an inch up to 4 and 5 inches long. And when we always use sterilized tweezers and gloves, and when we pulled the individual hairs off, that's exactly what they look like. This is them. And they all had the same sort of appearance as what I described, pubic hair. Now, we were getting pretty excited because we're having some good luck. Even though you think, this is another picture of some hair we got, even though you think you know what you have, sometimes it isn't so easy. But you needed a microscope to be 100% sure. Now, here's some close-up pictures of hair with a follicle at the end. And the follicle, that little bulb, contains the DNA, which is what we were after. Now, one of the things that we wanted was blood, saliva, flesh. You could ask for the moon and see what you get.
They got flesh, by the way. Of course, they went on Coast to Coast, which is a huge show. I think it still gets 20 million listeners. And they solicited people for whatever, hair, flesh, blood. And apparently there was this hunter in Northern California that saw Bigfoot and shot it and got a piece of flesh from it. Like, he went and grabbed a piece of flesh and came back, and he sent that to Paul and his team.
Well, a hunter in Northern California,
here it is,
stated that he shot a Bigfoot, and he knew where he shot it. And when he shot it, a piece of flesh came off, and he had it, and he gave it to Melba, Dr. Ketchum. And on this flesh sample was hair, and this is the flesh sample that was submitted. Did it turn out to be good? 100% good. Now, there were a bunch of people on various shows that criticized, ridiculed, demeaned.
So, he goes through the community that basically all these Bigfoot researchers, especially the ones that go on TV and are at these conferences and doing presentations, that they won't talk about anything weird about Bigfoot. They'll say, oh, it's just a gorilla, or it's Gigantopithecus or whatever. But the DNA evidence does not ever say that. It always comes back human. And then they say, oh, then the researchers just contaminated that. And but what Paulides went through, he did it himself. He knew it wasn't contaminated. They used sterilized gloves. tweezers, and even when they send it into for DNA testing, they also make sure that it's not contaminated before they do the testing. And even if it was contaminated, he said that his DNA would show up, but it doesn't. I mean, it will show human DNA and the mitochondrial DNA or from the mother, but then not identified in the father or the other side. So what's this here? Oh yeah, so this is under a microscope how a Bigfoot hair looks like.
DNA was of high enough quality and quantity that the core samples underwent a structural analysis using electron microscopy. Now, remember when I said we needed a microscope? Well, of course, we got one pretty quick. And I wanted to show you how unique Bigfoot hair looks. That is Bigfoot hair. You will never forget the looks of this. It almost has guards on it to protect it. It's very, very odd. There's no other hair like this. And every Bigfoot hair looks the same. Like I said before, I could teach a juvenile how to identify Bigfoot hair in 10 minutes. So, as Dr. Ketchum is getting these samples in, she goes through and she starts to take pictures for us to help us. So, Bigfoot hair, human hair.
Yeah, look at that. Look at the human hair. Very distinctly different from the Sasquatch hair, obviously. But look how it's just protected. The Sasquatch hair.
Human hair doesn't have any of the guards on it that this does. Very, very important because the consistency is absolute. And you could see how somebody who's a hair and fiber expert could easily say, well, not human. It's different. And it doesn't look like any other animal in North America's hair. It's a slide. It says, smoking gun, 95% DNA samples human. It's important to note, until the DNA study, many hair samples had been tested throughout the years, and they kept coming back human mitochondrial DNA. I noticed this in the track record. After I went through time and time again, it always came back as this. And everybody always said, oh, it's just contaminated because some humans put their hands all over it. The first place that NABS turned for information about Bigfoot DNA was a track record, a newsletter produced by Ray Crow for 17 years. There was not an index for the track record at the time. We reviewed all 174 newsletters and gleaned DNA articles and submissions. After reviewing the track record documents, we turned to the web to see what it had to offer. Not much. The year we undertook this review was 2005, and many television shows about Bigfoot did not exist. Results. The results of our research found that over 95% of the DNA on purported Bigfoot specimens returned as human. NABS found this as an extremely puzzling result, considering that the big names in the Bigfoot world that consider themselves researchers proclaimed that Bigfoot was a type of ape. Many of these researchers claimed that the DNA showing human was compromised or contaminated, and the results should be disregarded. Now, many of you know more about DNA right now than you ever knew in your life. And when somebody from the academic world says, oh, the DNA is contaminated, you look at them and you think, oh, they must know. So, okay, yeah, let's forget about those. See, your mind's getting brainwashed already. Yeah. We saw the same discussion time after time. Discount the results, they are wrong. Again, almost every moderately famous researcher known for investigating Bigfoot issues proclaimed the studies and results were flawed. Every one. Refusing to accept the possibility that the Bigfoot could be closely related to humans, the results were always explained away as human contamination. In fact, these were most likely legitimate Bigfoot samples yielding human DNA. Imagine if they were all correct. It is statistically very improbable that the scores of samples tested over the years were all contaminated. Even if one was legitimate, then we have some groundbreaking findings that validate the finding of the DNA study. Every DNA researcher in the world decontaminates the samples before they're tested.
Exactly. It's decontaminated before the testing.
It's in the protocol. And when we use the robotic machine, that's the first thing it does. Very important. Now, mitochondrial DNA, female, remember that. When Dr. Ketchum analyzed the mitochondrial DNA contained in the skin tags of the Bigfoot hair, every sample tested human, but it was non-human hair. The point cannot
DNA is human, but non-human hair.
be stressed enough. Non-human hair yielded human mitochondrial DNA. Do you understand this? So that hair I showed you that had all the guards on it, not human hair, but it yielded human mitochondrial DNA. This is huge, folks, and it's important to understand.
All right, so what's the nuclear DNA, right? Because that shows both sides.
You link the eyewitness testimony that witnessed a large hairy bipedal hominid leaving the hair, you now have empirical evidence that Bigfoot is a human hybrid at the minimum.
Yep. Human hybrid.
Okay. Dave, you made a good point. But why is your group the only group out there that's done this? Very good question.
Because everyone else has been infiltrated. That's why. Just like the UFO subject. You know, keep all the weird stuff, all the woo away from the plebes. They won't understand it. They're too simple-minded. Let them just worry about their jobs and consuming.
Very good question. I think it's pretty easy.
I mean, obviously, something's going around this planet creating human hybrids. We are some type of hybrid, right? Or hybrid of something. Even the Nazca mummies showed human DNA, but then other DNA. So something's going around hybridizing. I definitely recommend watching his documentary called Missing 411, The UFO Connection. The conclusions are amazing. I don't want to ruin anything. So definitely go watch that.
Other groups, think about any Bigfoot group out there that's in the woods looking for real sequences, and 10 yielded partial genomes. The 30 samples showed 16 different human haplotypes. The interesting and unexpected finding is the origin of the haplotypes. The majority show origination from Europe, Asia, and Africa. Only 4 of the haplotypes originated close to where the samples were collected in North America. That's odd. That's really, really odd. And I don't have an explanation on it. Remember, I said that everyone wants to make a big deal about contamination.
Okay, wait. I want to find where he talks about the other side.
If there was contamination present in the sample sequence, the sequences would compete against one another prior to sequencing, causing a contaminated sample to have a Q30 score of 40 to 50. Now, again, these scores are given by a robotic machine. Remember this. I don't know how else to tell you. I keep it down to the very basics. Now, if you ever come out to see me, the 2-hour program I give about this is probably a little more heavy with science, a little less heavy with boom, and
maybe
a little slower. Contaminated sample to have a Q30 score of 40 to 50. Now, again, these scores are given by biggest certified labs in the Southwest United States, university lab.
All right. Anyway, there is somewhere in this presentation where he does say the father side, we don't know what it is. Or at least the GenBank doesn't, which has every single species on this planet. All right, moving on. Definitely go check out that presentation. Watch 411, the UFO Connections, amazing documentary. This is Archaics X. Such a great channel on YouTube. Check him out. His research is fantastic. I'm loving it. I've been catching up for a month now. And he takes ancient knowledge, ancient books and religions. He looks at all of them to predict, because he says we live in a construct or reality that's been constructed, and that it's like an illusion. And, we've heard that before. A hologram, if you may, a virtual reality kind of thing. So, and that there are certain times that this reality gets reset, and that the people, the elite, and not just our elite, but the elite before us in other civilizations have known about this when it happens in intervals, and will protect themselves, from this. But they have put it in books, like Revelations. You said it's in there. The Quran has stuff in there. I said the Bible. Other books, from Greek literature that he digs up, Sumerian tablets. So anyway, all of that research, he's created some great diagrams like this. He goes through all the years. Basically, 2040 is when the reset of this civilization is going to be. And there are, of course, 6 seals to be opened up before then. We are in the second seal. He said the first seal was basically COVID 2020. Second seal is happening now. Third seal will be in 2028. Anyway, in this post, he says, this chart was drawn and posted a year ago. Shows perfectly the seals programming, how we are moving forward in reverse. Shows that much conflict will emerge to take place, to take peace from the earth in 2024, 2025, 2026, and 2027. The second seal. So the second seal is taking peace from earth, which means there's going to be lots of war. The rituals of the past become the reality of the future. Case in point, notice that the sixth seal, or 2040, the Phoenix phenomenon, sun turns black, stars fall from the sky, worldwide earthquake, people hide in caves, corresponds isometrically to 2000 AD, the Y2K scare, total blackout. Interesting. Yeah, there it is. 2000 Y2K correlates 2040. Facebook 2004 with this seal right here. Beyond construct. If you guys haven't listened or followed Archaics on YouTube, do it. Go back. Listen to all the research he's done. He's written books. He's an author. Many books, huge bibliographies. The guy seriously knows what he's talking about. So basically 2040 is the date, you guys, of when the Phoenix phenomenon comes back and resets everything. Cool stuff. Crazy rabbit hole to go down, but I'll let you guys do that on your own. So remember that flight, we did talk about this in Brazil. The Brazilian Vopas airliner that went down the other day, killing all 62 passengers and crew, was also carrying cancer doctors who were actively researching alternative cures. Allegedly, some of the doctors were looking for definitive connections between mRNA COVID jabs and turbo cancer. That's a no-no. If they really were, then I wouldn't be surprised that their plane got taken down. Apparently, only half of the doctors got on this flight. The other half thought the flight was canceled by luck. Crazy, right? Let's listen to this.
So y'all remember that Brazilian flight that just went down? We know some of the people that were on board. TikTok, I'm just reading the news. 8 sea doctors who dedicated their lives to saving others were among the 62 passengers. But there's more than just that. There were actually supposed to be 15 sea doctors on board that flight, but 7 of them canceled last minute for a different flight. As of right now, I don't know what kind of C-word studies that they were doing, but it said that their page is still up on Twitter right now. They have to be the most unlucky people in this world. And completely unrelated, did y'all know that when the Titanic was set to sail, that on board were a whole bunch of bankers who were opposed to the Federal Reserve?
Yep.
And also supposed to be on that same trip were a whole bunch of bankers that wanted the Federal Reserve. And they all happened to cancel the same day, even the same hour. Again, prayers for all family and the people affected. And if I come across any other information, I will let you know.
Yes, rest in peace. Crazy coincidence. All right, in physics, this has come up recently. August 16th, a couple days ago, photon entanglement could explain the rapid brain signals behind consciousness. So this is talking about quantum entanglement, where this communication that's faster than light is actually instantaneous, no matter what the distance is. So they're saying the brain utilizes this. Our neurons utilize this communication, and that's why, and they're saying that's what consciousness, or gives rise to consciousness, this ability to have faster than light instantaneous communication in our brains gives us this feeling of consciousness or reality of consciousness. So it is, some scientists have suggested that quantum mechanics, and in particular quantum entanglement, is the key to unraveling the phenomenon, which is consciousness. Cool stuff. Still trying to figure out consciousness. I think they're on the right track. This makes sense, but what I think is where the quantum entanglement is, it's non-local, somewhere else. Our brains are like antennas, and people that that meditate and like shamans, and they have experiences with the beyond. And it's just, and if you talk about the reality of the soul, there is something non-local about us, almost like we're living in avatars. So cool research with quantum physics and consciousness. All right, let's finish up with some politics. This is funny. Well, not funny, but maybe ridiculous. This is the Israeli representative to the UN, and he's giving his conclusion to his speech. Let's see what he says.
Though who knows, perhaps another session will be called because of more terrorist propaganda. I would like to leave you with this.
Yes, please tell us.
I have been immensely, immensely proud to represent my country here. The most moral country in the world. The most moral country in the world. You listen, Palestinian representative.
Yeah, you listen. The most moral. You listen, you.
In this warped place. I hope one day you will also see the bias and perversion of morality here. And I pray that you will see the truth. The terrorist organization that this guy represents here and tyrannical regimes should be condemned, not protected, and that Israel should be praised. We are today the vanguard of civilization. We are the vanguard of civilization. But until then, Am Israel Chai.
All right, the vanguard of civilization, huh? Well, let's take a look at the vanguard of civilization.
A strike like that. They use a very... No, some of you aren't getting it. Do you see that? That is a precision strike. That is what the occupation is capable of when they're trying to target one area, one apartment. That is a multi-story building, and they only took out one apartment. Do you want to know who they were targeting? This is who they were targeting. These babies were 4 days old. This is a photo of them right after they were born. You see, beautiful, tiny, newborn. Yeah, they were targeting them, their mom, and their grandmother. The father had left to go get their birth certificates. He wasn't there. Do you know what they have to do to carry out a strike like that? They use a very specific kind of JDAM missile that's got a very low yield. And it requires that they point a laser at their target, which means that they have to have reconnaissance. They use infrared to see into the building. They've shown us before. They can see who is in there, and they can determine whether they are male or female or adult or child. They determine it based off of body heat and shape. There were 4 people in that apartment. 2 of them were 4 days old. One of them was their mom, and the other was their grandmother. They knew that he wasn't there. They specifically targeted 2 newborn babies, their mother and their grandmother. Why? Dr. Juman Arfa. She had been posting to her personal Facebook page about the snipers targeting children directly in the head and chest, which she was personally witness to. They killed a woman and her children and her mother to keep her silent. They had just gotten the birth certificates for Acer and Azel. And this is what the father saw when he got home. He didn't find out that they were all gone until he got to the hospital. He was still holding their birth certificates. With full knowledge and full intent, they targeted 2 newborn babies.
Most moral army in the world. What do you guys think about that? He's Ken O'Keefe. I'm surprised he went on here. I think it's a BBC show. But let's see how he handles this onslaught. Ken O'Keefe long story.
Media put out whatever Hamas tell them as a fact.
Do you know that 0.02% of the human population has a massively disproportionate amount of control of the mainstream media?
I do.
Do you know who controls Hollywood? Are you suggesting that Hamas
Disney
is a counterweight to the
Are you saying Hollywood
Jewish
is the media? The
control
movie industry is the
of
media.
And these are
The
facts,
movies aren't the media.
facts and truth.
Be quiet.
Truth. I don't disagree that propaganda exists on all sides, but the idea that the Islamic propaganda outweighs the Jewish propaganda for the Jewish state of Israel.
Hollywood, Die Hard, what are you talking about?
Be quiet.
At best.
Listen, that is not.
You're mixing up the media with Hollywood. You're mixing up reality with movies.
You know, I think about sacking him every week, and I'm really beginning to think about it now. Yeah. The problem is,
I can use your mind.
You can't. The problem is that we are now allowing Hamas, who are terrorists. You've got to,
Listen, let me reply.
There's no way you can.
I want to give you the satisfaction of getting a different answer from anything. First off, genocide. Let's get into that. To destroy in whole or part a national, ethnic, or religious group. That's Black's Law Dictionary. I've been quoting that ever since I made a film called The United States of Hypocrisy.
Which is not what's happening,
about
is it?
the Hawaiian genocide 25 years ago.
Is it?
That policy is carrying on to this day. Now, with regard to terrorists, the government in Ireland right now was the terrorist of the day back in Thatcher's days. Do you ever hear of a guy named Nelson Mandela? You ever hear of him? Yeah.
Patronizing
both sides of Ireland had terrorists. Both sides. You don't know it.
According to Margaret Thatcher and Ronald, terrorist. He became a much revered and respected man. He did. He did. So, listen, Hamas, by the way, was democratically elected. They have never been given an opportunity to allow the political process. Jimmy Carter himself said it was a valid election. Now, if you ask
Jimmy
about
Carter nearly ruined the world. You can't go and lie. Jimmy Carter and Obama, probably the two worst presidents in America.
If you want to say that the election was invalid, fair enough. You don't have to like them. I don't like any of them. They all should be. I took an oath to protect and defend the Constitution of the United States, to fight all enemies, foreign and domestic. So help me God. I took that serious. That was a 19-year-old kid that I was. I've taken that serious ever since.
So you've got the experience to understand.
They're all traitors, all of them.
But
every president except Kennedy.
Why is it now acceptable? Let's put it this way, and you please be quiet. Why is it so acceptable to be anti-Semitic? We've had marches through our
the Palestinians are Semitic. Obviously. They are speaking Semitic languages coming from the Semitic region.
It's perfectly acceptable to walk through the capital of this country shouting, "Kill the Jews," from the river to the sea.
Where do you hear that?
I've heard it on a lot of news programs. They're not putting it out now.
Which news program?
Oh, main news programs.
Which one?
Go and look.
I've looked all the time. I've never heard anybody talking about.
Let's talk about the 40,000 dead. Let's talk about the 40,000 dead.
Well, please tell the whole audience where to find it. I don't know where to find that. I've not seen nothing about kill the Jews.
Flags, kill the Jews. There've been people.
I've never seen any kill the Jew stuff.
Well, then you haven't watched.
I haven't seen it. I'm not doing my research.
That's what they all do that. But let's talk about the 40.
Where is it?
All right.
Why can't you cite it? Show it. Tell people where to go.
I am not going to go and find it. Go online and look for the march.
From the river to the sea. You've seen that, haven't you?
Do you know about Greater Israel? Do you know what Greater Israel is?
Forget all this crap. What about the 40,000? Let's talk about the 40,000. Let's talk about.
Do you know about Greater Israel?
Forget all that crap.
Do you know about the Samson option?
Just forget all this. Do you know about the Samson option? Conspiracy crap. Let's talk about what's going on.
There's no conspiracy.
Let's talk about what real stuff.
Samson option's a conspiracy.
All right, let's talk about.
Do you know a guy named Mordecai Vanunu who exposed the nuclear weapons program?
Do you believe there's 40,000 dead?
How about John F. Kennedy, who stood up to them and wanted Demona inspected?
This is irrational.
There's no conspiracy theory there.
The main story we're trying to talk to you about is the 40,000 dead. Do you agree there's 40,000 dead with the Hamas health ministry?
Do you agree with that?
You look confused.
Okay, excuse me. You are trying to ask a leading question to get the answer you want. I'm going to answer the question. I'll tell you what I do know. There's about 20,000 dead kids. And even if they're not,
how many dead
by the way, do you grieve over those three kids that died recently?
All right, let's not end the show on a negative note. I wanted to prove that Ken O'Keefe is great with mainstream media. He's being attacked here, and he still does great. Here is Dan Bilzerian. He's on PBD, and he made
supporting
this
Israel
statement.
is bad for America. Netanyahu is a convicted war criminal, and Israel is not our ally. We fought way too many wars for Israel, and we certainly don't need to give them any more money. July 25th. These idiots have ruined movies. Everything they put out is literally propaganda. And then all of a sudden, we got scripture here. For what shall it profit a man if he shall gain the whole world and lose his own soul? Is this recent, comments you're making about Israel a recent thing, or have you always had these beliefs?
It's more recent. I didn't really realize what a problem it was until recently. And then everybody was scared to say something about it. My brother told me, you can't say anything about it. They'll fucking kill you. Like, everybody basically said that I couldn't say anything about it. And actually now they're like literally like trying to like kick me off the board of my company because of those tweets. So, like, shit. Yeah, I've definitely had a lot of like negative pushback, a lot of my Jewish friends, but I don't give a fuck. You know, it's like one of those things where I know that it's the right thing. And the fact that everybody else is scared to say it makes me, you know, feel obligated to be vocal about it.
Why do you think it's the right thing?
Because I know that they're a fucking parasite. Like, they provide the U.S. absolutely no value. They've done so many things that, you know, would constitute, you know, an act of war against us. I mean, USS Liberty, Lebanon Affair, I mean, it can go on and on and on and on and on. But, you know, I think they knew about 9/11. I think they had JFK assassinated. The first thing that he wanted to do, you know, right before he died was, you know, make AIPAC a foreign entity, and not allow them to have nukes. And then all of a sudden this fucking guy's dead. And Jack Ruby, who is Jack Rubenstein, you know, I mean, it's just like, and then you just, I don't know, man, I can't ignore all the shit that they've done. They sold their secrets. Netanyahu lied to us about weapons of mass destruction. We fought all these fucking wars. My friends have died over there. Like, you know, and I just look at what they provided us with, and it's fucking, it's not nothing. It's like a negative, you know, it's not, even if they just didn't do jack shit, that would be, you know, bad, but they've actually done things to hurt us over and over and over again. So like this whole thing of they're our greatest allies, just complete fucking bullshit. And, you know, we send them $100 billion, then they send AIPAC $100 million, and then they distribute it to our politicians, and every politician is a little fucking AIPAC handler walking around telling them what to fucking say and how to vote. And it's just like, look, I'll donate like $100,000 to politicians, you know, and they call me up like, hey, you need anything? Like every week. I don't need shit. I fucking sit on my ass. I don't do anything. I don't care. I don't fucking break any laws. I don't need any favors. Like, I just gave it to them because I didn't want to see any more fucking retard, you know, Democrats in there. So, you know, but that's 100,000. Like, what does 100 million buy you?
Exactly.
How many fucking phone calls do those guys get? You know? And so, like, I just know how it works. And the system is broken. Like, these people get into office and they don't have very much money, and they get out of office with fucking tens or hundreds of millions of dollars. It's not a fucking accident, right?
Is that an Israel thing, or is that anybody? Because China's doing the same thing.
China, it doesn't have they don't have an AIPAC. Like, Israel is the only one that has a fucking, like, a lobby in the U.S. fucking, you know, giving these politicians money.
Okay, no, every country, the big ones all have lobbyists. They all have lobbying that they're doing.
Not in the U.S. They're registered as foreign entities.
Right.
Right. I mean, if you're talking about, are you going to the dual citizenship part with Israel, you know, Israel?
That's another problem is a lot of our politicians have far more allegiance to Israel than they do the United States. I mean, that's
so much truth in this. So definitely check that interview out as well. And yeah, people are waking up. Is it too late though? I mean, could that be why this push for a new war, this last war, and we just sent another, was it $20 billion worth of F-15s and missiles, and to go do what? They've bombed all of Gaza, so it's obviously a much bigger war that's planned. Anyway, let's end on this. So this is from Brian Rommel. Been listening to the explosion of Mongolian metal bands over the last years. Let's listen to these guys. It's really, really, really cool. Yeah, great music. That is great music. Well, that's all we have for you guys for this episode. So yes, follow us on X at UAP the podcast. I'm at Breakaway Civil. Topher, he should be back next week. He's at Topher et al. On Twitter. Reach out to any of us. Give us feedback. Let us know if you guys want us to cover something. We'll do our best to. We're on all the podcasting platforms at Uncovering Anomalies Podcast. We're on YouTube. We're on Rumble, BitChute, Odyssey, all of those platforms. There's a support link at the end of each episode. So we'd be very grateful for you guys to click on that link and support us. Other than that, let us know how we're doing. And again, this is Adam from Uncovering Anomalies Podcast. Today is August 18th, 2024. Thank you for listening, and we'll see you all next week.